Nick De Sena.
Hey, what's up? This is Nick with Motorcycle.com, and today we just got done riding the brand new 2025 Aprilia Tuono 457. Now, you guys know Aprilia's recipe. Where the RS bikes go, the Tuono is sure to follow. And look, it's a pretty convincing recipe because you take a super sport motorcycle and then you realize, well, some people might want something a little bit more street oriented. They might want something that has most of that performance with a set of handlebars on it and a little bit less fairing overall, getting most of that sportiness, but just in a much more street capacity. So that is the Tuono's story. Now, if we look at the entire lineup of the Tuono family right now, we start up high with the V4 powered motorcycles. Those are 170-ish, 180-ish horsepower bikes. You go down to the Tuono 660, up in that 100 horsepower range, give or take, and then you come down here to the entry-level Tuono 457, which makes a claimed 47.6 horsepower and 32 foot-pounds of torque out of this 457cc parallel twin engine. If you compare the RS 457 to the Tuono 457, what are the critical differences? Well, that's going to be your riding position. There's going to be a distinct lack of fairing up in this area, and really they've restyled the Tuono to favor a bit of a throwback. They're referencing the original 1000R Tuono V-twin that dates back to 2006, so it actually has this front headlight unit that's attached to the fork itself instead of the, we'll say, Victorian influenced Tuono, which usually is really splitting hairs calling it a naked bike at that point, because the Tuono traditionally basically has a fairing. This does not. This is truly nude, truly naked, which of course I just like saying on video. Now, before we get into the rest of the bike, let's talk about the riding position. The main changes from the RS 457 to this bike, obviously going to be a set of these nice wide handlebars. They're up about 124 millimeters and then back about 14 millimeters. It also has a unique subframe seat area. The subframe is actually the same, but the plastics here and everything around it and the seat itself is unique to this motorcycle. Still a similar seat height of 31.5 inches tall. And overall, it's going to be very reminiscent of the other Tuono motorcycles. The foot pegs and rear sets are in the same exact place as before. So when I sit on this bike, I stand at 5 foot 10 inches tall, 32-inch inseam. If you look at the video, you'll notice that I have quite a bit of bend in the knee. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's uncomfortable, but there is a possibility of that creeping in over longer rides. Now, they've done a little bit to dampen the vibrations from the engine in respect to the riding position in general, and that's going to come with some damping mechanisms up in the handlebars, so basically just some rubber dampers where it mounts in, and then also the foot pegs have some rubber damping in them. Great, that just sort of smooths things out. So let's get into the other nitty gritty. Now, chassis is a carryover from the RS 457. If you guys can't hear that, that is MotoGP star Jorge Martin ripping a Tuono 457. I assure you, it's the coolest thing on the planet. But I need to get back to facts here. Now, twin spar aluminum frame, class leading in that regard. Everything else in this class uses kind of, if we're just being honest, flimsy steel trellis frames or tubular steel frames to some degree. Carry over again with that steel banana type swing arm. Everything else in terms of chassis, geometry, etc., direct carryover. That also includes the suspension with preload adjustment in the front and preload adjustment in the rear. So minimal suspension in this class. If you're looking at this for your first bike, these entry-level quote-unquote motorcycles do not have the same suspension features that we'd see on something with a much higher price point, because they can sort of hide the cost of those features in the bike. Now, since we're on the subject of suspension, rode a lot of street today. Actually, got to have some fun pace and avoided the rain that is coming down now. Damping wise, I'm probably a bit carb loaded for this motorcycle as it stands, but I think it could use a little bit more damping, a little bit more spring in the shock, but really If I were to start cranking on the preload, I feel like it might start getting a little bit harsh. But for you shorter riders out there, again, this bike is really gonna help you if you have a shorter inseam length, because I can absolutely flat foot on the ground confidently. Lighter riders will probably get along with the suspension a little bit more than someone heavier, but that said, it still keeps the chassis in control, and there's not flexion that you would experience with, say, an MT-03 or 392, things like that. Now, the chassis is pretty impressive. We got to do some fun riding, and I had a blast on it, so I'm pretty happy in that regard. Braking, you still got that bi-bree four-piston caliper that comes with a 320mm rotor. Got this bi-bree master cylinder. Really, that's some of my few complaints. I just like better braking, but you can reach to the aftermarket to get something better. Just give you more feel, more bite, more attack. Besides the bi-bree brakes, another cost savings measure is seen in the Eurogrip Pro Torque Extreme HR tires, which are made by Indian manufacturer TVS. Now, I wouldn't blame a lot of our audience for not being familiar with that model tire, and while grip isn't too bad, they tend to feel numb as you start carrying higher lean angles. Reaching for sportier mainstream options would only benefit the chassis, but that does bring us to our next point. The Aprilia Tuono 457 is designed and engineered in Nuale, Italy, but manufactured in India, again, to help keep costs down. Getting into the engine, that's what we want to talk about, the start of the show. 457cc engine, as we mentioned before, 47 horsepower, 32 foot-pounds of torque. And I'm glad we actually reviewed it overseas because it is not bit by the North American emissions hole that you see in second gear in a boatload of motorcycles right now. So this thing pulls. It pulls pretty much all the way up to about 9 grand-ish, about that area, until it starts signing off. It comes with the ability to fit an optional up-down quick shifter on it. Shifting is smooth, pretty tight. I would say much tighter than the KTM and Yamaha equivalents. Now, the vibrations that my colleague Troy Sehan noticed with the RS457 back in that launch last year, they're not as prominently displayed here because you have those damping mechanisms, just some rubber stuff slammed on the bike, on the foot pegs, and on the handlebar to quell those vibrations. But handling wise, it feels light. This thing tips the scales at a claimed 385 pounds, 175 kilograms. It steers well, has good front end feel. You could help it out with someone of my size in this carb diet that I've been experiencing in Italian with a heavier spring rate to give it a little bit more support. But realistically, at $6,599, you're getting a lot for the bike. It also comes with some class-leading electronics in terms of the fact that it has ride-by-wire, so that gives you eco, sport, and rain, as well as 3 modes of selectable traction control. And then my favorite setting is the 2-channel ABS that has front and rear ABS, and then you can disable ABS in the rear to have some hooligan fun, slide the thing around, and maybe even do a track day. Now, the big question from you guys is going to be, do I get the RS457 or the Tuono 457? And really, you have to do some introspection. Not the kind that actually helps you out or makes you learn about your personality in any capacity, but the kind that makes you buy a motorcycle. If you're gonna ride on the street, more often than not, look, the Tuono is probably gonna be your guy. It's upright, it's comfortable, cozy for a lot of people. I'm probably at the cusp of where that seat to foot peg ratio is really asking some questions there. But if you're on the street, Tuono. If you have racetrack aspirations, you might want to do some club racing, etc., etc., RS457. Because really, what we're talking about, the differences between the bikes are the riding position and just a few other minor things. Mechanically, they're right there. Now, this is Nick with Motorcycle.com, wrapping up the review of the 2025 Aprilia Tuono 457 that comes in at $6,599. That is a couple $100 cheaper than the fully fared RS457. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and drop them down below. We'll get you some answers. Now, I'm in Italy. You know what I got to do? Gelato, pizza, probably in Venice, since we are in Nuale, Italy. As you can see, some of the race department right behind me. But that's it. Take care, you guys. Be safe.